I love the Monster Hunter genre, so when I heard of Relink, I immediately wanted to play it. It ended up being a solid game that wasn't perfect, but offered an enjoyable experience. Naturally, when Endless Ragnarok was set to expand on the world, I was excited to see what new content it would offer. Now that it released, and players have a decent idea of what the experience entails, is it worth checking out, or is it a step in the wrong direction? Before getting into the DLC itself, I wanted to touch on previous commitments, since this is post-game content that requires a sizable investment to even start. In addition to beating the story, players need to play through the new Roguelike mode and win a fight. The fight acts as something of a wall. Prior to the fight, you are suggested to have a max terminus weapon, which was a substantial grind in the past. Thankfully, that really isn't true anymore. Most of the resources needed are easily obtained from the new roguelike mode. I didn't keep track, but I think it took me around 2 hours to change my main, unlock their weapon, and max it out. In all, it shouldn't take that long to get back into the game. Anyway, let's get into narrative. Endless Ragnarok takes place after the events of the main game. Basically, there are looming threats that you need to take care of. Much of the story is told through post-mission exposition dumps, which isn't ideal, but it's better than nothing. Outside of that are the occasional NPC interactions or brief cutscene. Though, everything happens in town or via a mission. Perhaps the most interesting aspect is how a couple notable threats were added from the mobile game. These being Beelzebub, The World, and I believe Hexachromatic Hierarch. It has a different name, though it still drops Hexa items. The story also requires players to beat Lucelius, which is a nice addition given he was a post-release optional boss. In all, it's an enjoyable experience that fans of the mobile game will likely get a bit more out of, assuming you can survive.
空から溶け出たような姿は、六の竜に最も近しき存在である。
For the most part, gameplay is unchanged. Players are given 2 attacks, a handful of spells, the ability to dodge, and are expected to best a diverse range of enemies. Some characters also feature unique mechanics. My favorite was Id, who can transform into a dragon complete with a different gameplay loop. Having said that, differences largely expand on the base game, then redefine it, a fact that appears throughout. For starters, existing monsters gain new attacks. To be perfectly honest, I haven't played the original fights in years, but only 3 fights had changes that stood out to me. Said changes also vary wildly. Lucelius starts with an auto-wipe mechanic, his moves appear in a different rotation, and other minor attack changes. Whereas Bahamut removes the attack shooting part, starts with a giant blast, and has shockwaves that need to be dodged when attacking. In all, the changes I saw centered around bringing harder mechanics to the forefront and streamlining the experience, both of which are appreciated choices. Also, a great way to keep older content relevant. Monsters also now drop crystals, which can be used to summon and control them in battle. Unfortunately, I found most people use them as an additional trait equip, though there are some cool options, like who wouldn't want to transform into a robot dragon? They also have unique moves, making it a lot more interesting than simple low-tier enemies. Beyond this, weapons gain access to a new system called Transcendence. While it gives additional stats, the main benefit is different perks. So, if you use Defender, it can have HP, resistance, damage cap, guts, and many more. It's a nice touch that gives players access to less commonly used traits. These weapons also gain additional mastery perks, a final trait at max level, plus a significant increase in stats. In addition to this, the mastery system was expanded with mastery traits. Like mastery, MSP is invested to increase a character's level. Each level gives a trait point, which can be used to unlock select perks. Each tier has a set cap, along with benefits for investing in one side over another. It's a welcome system since the perks are largely useful. Either by giving a set stat boost, changing how something behaves, or rewards a specific playstyle. All this leads to my biggest criticism of the original game, damage caps. For those unfamiliar, Relink has a rather complicated damage cap system. As the name suggests, every character and move can only deal so much damage. The trick was to figure out what the cap was, and balance your build around it. This was extremely annoying to do, as the only way to evaluate was to monitor damage numbers. I disliked the system so much, a sizable portion of my original review was centered on it. Here, it's better, but in some ways worse. Before getting to the bad, I want to applaud them for adding a damage cap option to training. When activated, I see how much damage I do in relation to the current damage cap. Thankfully, they keep it simple by making the goal 100%. Anything below it is damage on the table, and anything above it is pointless. What I hate about it is how it dictates builds, something where I think I better understand the logic behind it, despite still thinking it's bad. Damage caps were seemingly created with two goals in mind. The first was limiting players' ability to be overpowered. Many games implement something similar, as games need some amount of challenge to be fun. Defeating bosses in seconds is fun the first couple of times before the novelty wears off. This system handles the idea a bit differently. Instead of each stage having a set maximum, there is an overall difficulty set to your progress. Meaning, someone who beat the hardest mission in the game can deal more damage than someone who has yet to do so. How much just depends on their build. It is a small change that largely addresses criticism directed at progression systems. Take Destiny 2. I saw a lot of players express frustration at higher tier gear offering no tangible benefit in the content they enjoy. Why make a better build if you need to play content you don't enjoy and offers identical performance in content you do? Another benefit is addressing the low skill trap. If you're unfamiliar with the term, let me start by welcoming you to my channel. Anyway, as the name suggests, it's a trap that generally applies to low skill individuals. On paper, it makes a lot of sense. If you struggle to survive, the most logical course of action is to invest in health or defense. However, in practice, it's almost always easier to have better offense. What is the point of having a better dodge if the offensive build wins before you even need to dodge? Here, you can't go all in on attack, so you might as well build in some defense, except it isn't quite that simple either. Instead of going all in on attack, players invest heavily on items that increase your cap. In essence, players are left with the same outcome, except damage cap is less palatable than attack, regardless of whether they provide the same function. Look at it like this: more than half of my current build is centered around increasing damage cap. This includes half my gear slots, weapon choice, mastery, and all 4 summons. Despite this, on average, I deal 300% over my current damage cap, with some moves exceeding 700. Now, my build isn't perfect, but I'm ultimately limited due to trait caps. However, this would also be true with attack. It's the limit that encourages different options, not the name. That aside, I like that said limit allows me to invest in other options. I personally went with dodging, which vastly increased my survivability. It is actually wild how much easier the game is when you can vaguely dodge one move, be invincible for 5 seconds, and ignore everything else. It's also cool that summons are really hard to min-max. This allows some guilt-free suboptimal choices. Or, at least, I don't feel bad picking a less than desirable trait I like, because it also comes with a good equip bonus. Ironically, some of these issues also bleed into the new Conflux mode. Conflux is the name for the newly added roguelike mode. It comes in 5 difficulties, with different rewards, bosses, and total stages. On paper, it's everything one would expect from a tacked-on roguelike mode. Brief encounters, different paths, party stages, and RNG modifiers. Even if it sounds like I'm not a fan, I wouldn't say that's true. I actually really enjoy roguelikes because they are much closer to a pure gameplay experience. They're less about tactics and more about making do with whatever you get. They also tend to wrap around controllable variables. A good build for one character isn't necessarily a good one for another, something that is really important when this mode makes it extremely easy to platinum Relink. That alone is huge for me on a personal level, as I always wanted to platinum it. I just didn't want to grind a stage 200 times for weapon drops, nor did I want to spend hours leveling worthless gear to check a box. Where I think it falls behind is an extension of my comments on damage cap. Selectable benefits add things like attack, health, or damage cap. However, I don't have an easy way to quantify if there's an actual benefit. If I already exceed my damage cap, is there a benefit to gain more attack? I'd assume not, so it devolves into all the elements I just touched on. Damage cap is king. Unless there is nothing that enhances it, then you might as well invest in defensive augments. Here, it accomplishes the same overall goal. It gives value to choices that are typically checkboxes for completionists, the thing that no one uses except that one person online that swears it's amazing, then you try it, write down their name, and never listen to them again. Or, at least, that's my typical experience. Jokes aside, it makes for an enjoyable mode. I also really like the minigames. Not only are they roughly the same amount of time as an encounter, at least with a reasonable build, they're a lot of fun. My favorite are the spot the different stages. They use the same handful of stages, so once everything is memorized, this step can be skipped, with the differences often being surprisingly small. Like, one run I had flowers appear and it was instantly obvious, whereas another run the cat was slightly larger. Good balance where anyone can win or lose. Plus, long term, they can be memorized for a quick rundown to maximize efficiency. Other games include a chase and something similar to 3-card Monty, just with a playful twist around 3 identical NPCs moving around. I also really like how rewards work. In addition to things earned along the way, there are various selectable types. Each fit into a specific want or need to help progress, these ranging from upgrade materials to eliminating the need to run certain annoying stages. There are also benefits to doing lower levels. Anyone looking to get trophy or achievements like me aren't forced to do the higher difficulty ones. I can just boot up a level 3 run. It's also so weak by current standards, AI teams can auto-complete it. That said, there are 2 natives beyond stat complaints. The first is the difficulty cap is rather low. For the record, the recommended power for the highest difficulty, to my knowledge anyway, is 30,000. Whereas the highest difficulty missions are 45,000. As a result, it isn't quite the infinitely scalable mode. Another is the lack of co-op. I get this was probably due to variables, yet so many other games make it work. For many, any system is better than the lack thereof. One of the biggest concerns with DLC is length. Generally speaking, DLC and expansions have a low time to money ratio, especially when compared to the original release. Endless Ragnarok ends up in a weird place. How long to beat puts Relink at 16 hours. Looking at my edited video, my run of Endless Ragnarok was around 10 hours. Add in grinding and failures, it's maybe 13 hours, so overall, pretty close to the original story despite being half the cost. It also has a substantial post-game grind. Mastery alone is hours of repeating stages to gain access to more traits and benefits. Where it falls short is what that time is spent on. Most missions reuse existing content. Sure, the content was changed, but overall most of this DLC is revisiting old content at a higher level. This is also true for most of the chases as well. They're just stats or improvements to existing experiences. Still, I personally had fun. In some ways, I'd say this change felt palatable due to the massive 2-year break. I wasn't tired of fighting these bosses, so instead of frustration at reused content, it was a lot of, oh, I remember that guy, followed by a lot more of, oh, I remember that guy. There are also new characters that give players a fresh experience, or perhaps older characters that were added after you quit. Overall, I think Endless Ragnarok is worth it if you love the original or this genre. There could be more new encounters or better presentation, though at the end of the day, this is far more engaging than a lot of DLC. For example, I remember covering Destiny 2's The Edge of Fate, and while it was better in this regard, it was less fun overall. It really feels like they got what made Relink work, fit some of the things that didn't, then tossed in some new long-term chases for those who want to invest the time, which, honestly, is about all you could ask for. Hey, thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, don't forget to leave a like, and for more content, please subscribe.